Hello, everybody. Nelson Vergel here with discountedlabs.com and ExcelMale.com. Today, I'm going to cover a very important topic that I'm getting a lot of requests about from different people on ExcelMale is what blood test to get or to run while you're doing bodybuilding. You're using higher testosterone dosages or other products, and what to look for. Many doctors do not monitor bodybuilders. There's a lot of stigma associated with bodybuilding, as you well know from all the media exposure on performance enhancing substances. And it is the role of the intelligent and responsible bodybuilder to keep an eye on different blood tests to minimize side effects while maximizing muscle growth and fat burning, even if you're not a competitive bodybuilder or just bodybuild as a hobby. But anyways, I'm going to show two different cases, two different types of guys. I erased their personal data here. Friends of mine, one is doing using higher testosterone dosages plus nandrolone. Another one is using lower testosterone dosages. But the first one, I'm going to go through their blood tests, and Quest Diagnostics, which is a company I work with on discountedlabs.com, provides graphics on the history. If you have used, obviously, the company more than once to run a certain test, you can see whether or not something has increased, decreased. So it's real pretty. Quest does this, and you can always email info@discountedlabs.com if you want your results to be displayed this way. Anyways, this person is on a higher dose of testosterone, and this is a total testosterone blood test. Is done with mass spectrometry, liquid chromatography. It's the gold standard. It's the most accurate testing. It's a little more expensive than the old immunoassay that you can probably find online at a cheaper price. At Discounted Labs, it's under $50. That and total and free testosterone. So this is total. The person has 2,968 nanograms per deciliter. You can see here in the range what Quest considers normal. Every company has a different range based on their database. Here you see 250 nanograms per deciliter to up to 1,100. So most doctors are looking for patients to be in this range. If you go to a doctor to get your testosterone checked because you have symptoms of low testosterone, like low sex drive, fatigue, low mood, etc., and you're closer to 250, you may have a problem getting your doctor to justify it to your insurance company to get testosterone treatment paid for. But a lot of doctors use compounding pharmacies where basically it's a self-pay kind of basis, so that you don't have to go through nightmares of having insurance companies telling you yes, no. For instance, you may have a 300 nanogram blood test result on testosterone, and the doctors say, well, insurance company doesn't want to pay for it, but you have all the symptoms, obviously. So just keep that in mind. I'm digressing a little bit, but I'm gonna proceed. So free testosterone, which is usually around 2% or more of total testosterone, is also high, obviously, because this person is using higher bodybuilding doses. And that's okay if that's the person. The higher you go on testosterone total and free, the more potential side effects that you may have. And I will show you guys, or ladies, what this means when it comes to blood work. There is a panel, two panels on discountedlabs.com that are called bodybuilding lab test panels. One is a basic and another one is more comprehensive. So I will be speaking about them right now, okay? So we go through lipid panel, which is a cholesterol panel. Testosterone replacement or even anabolic dosages are not known for increasing LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol. So this person, obviously, even though he has using higher doses of testosterone, you see 156, which is under the 200 milligrams per deciliter. So that's okay. That's expected, really. HDL really is the issue. The higher you go on testosterone dosages, or anabolics like androlone, oxandrolone, stanozolol, the lower your HDL, the good cholesterol. Androgens in general tend to decrease HDL cholesterol. There's still debate on why that is caused, but as you can tell, that this guy has already 38. And we don't know what the long-term consequences of not having the cleaning agent, the HDL, be at a good range. But you can probably infer long-term that's not a good thing, right? Not to have that cleaning HDL cholesterol in good ranges. Triglycerides are also interesting. Those are basically soluble fats, fatty acids, and androgens, testosterone included, obviously, tend to decrease triglycerides, burn that triglyceride down. So basically, you see in this case, his triglycerides are 93. This is basically, I had to remind, I didn't mention this before, on a fasting state in the morning before breakfast. So that's really something I expected anyway. So, and I'm sorry, that was the total cholesterol that I mentioned before. So this is the LDL cholesterol, which went up a little bit to under 100, but that's still a good range, a good value. So there's a cholesterol to HDL ratio. He still has a good value here on the green, 4.1, even though he had a little bit of an LDL increase and an HDL decrease, and the same for the non-HDL cholesterol. Now we get into what we call the comprehensive metabolic panel, which includes glucose and liver function, kidney function, and some electrolytes. So the blood sugar is good. It's on fasting, 70 on the lower side, but that's not an issue. It's not probably actually even better to have a lower fasting glucose. The urea nitrogen produced in the kidneys by metabolism of protein is high, and he is on a high protein diet for bodybuilding, muscle building. So this is not surprising, but this is extremely high protein diet. We don't know what the long-term consequences of having urea nitrogen this high for a long time, but most bodybuilders cycle on and off not only their products but also their diet. Creatinine, which comes from the breakdown of muscle protein metabolism in the kidney, is surprisingly pretty good. This guy is not using creatine supplements, which tend to increase creatinine and tend to concern doctors, because doctors don't understand that just, there is nothing wrong with the kidneys. It's just that this person is taking creatine supplements for muscle building, but in this case, he's not. So it's a pretty good value, surprisingly. eGFR is really the filtration rate, estimated filtration rate of the kidneys. And as you can tell, anything above 60 is good. It's actually 91 in his case, which is extremely good. eGFR can decrease if you have kidney dysfunction, if you're dehydrated, if you're taking a lot of creatine supplements, which, as I said, is only the supplement. It doesn't mean that your kidneys are in a malfunction state. But in his case, it's good. And there are two types of estimations: one for non-African Americans, and one for African Americans. In his case, he's non-African American. And the reason why there are two types is because there are different equations depending on BMI, and there's some ethnically related issues that are still debated, by the way. The bond creatinine ratio is obviously high because the blood urea nitrogen is high, as we saw before. So that's just basically another way to kind of measure. Some doctors measure kidney function that way, but it's high because of the higher protein intake that this person is going through. Sodium is a very important electrolyte that keeps our body working. In his case, it's okay, it's good. Potassium, especially for heart functioning, is very good too. You have to really watch out if you're a bodybuilder that is decreasing, trying to manage blood pressure and water retention with diuretics. since they can, diuretics can affect these electrolytes, and that's not a good thing. So you have to keep an eye on that unless you're taking potassium sparing diuretics. Chloride is also on the, in a good side, on the lower side, and that's sodium and chloride usually tend to go hand in hand. We consume salt, which is sodium chloride, and our kidneys, excuse me, keep good balance, unless obviously you're going through kidney dysfunction. So in this case, he's good. Carbon dioxide too, which can be out of whack in kidney dysfunction and acidify the blood. In his case, is good. Calcium in his blood is good. Protein in his blood, even though he's taking a lot of protein in a diet, his blood is still balanced. It is basically getting metabolized in the kidneys and leaving the body urea in the urine. Albumin, which is a protein that holds onto hormones, basically sex hormones, and releases the hormones that the body needs. It's also good, which is non-surprising. Low albumin is usually present in people with malnutrition, and high albumin in people with chronic kidney disease. Globulin is still also in a good range. It usually is, even with the guys that are really bodybuilding very extremely high doses and working out really hard. Albumin globulin ratio, good. Bilirubin, a very good measure of liver toxicity, especially if you're taking supplements and stuff. That's actually, in his case, very good. Alkaline phosphatase, it's really connected with thyroid function, bone health. His case is a little bit on the low side. It's also connected, especially if he's slow, with low vitamin D levels or high parathyroid hormones, which is a hormone that the parathyroid glands produce to keep bone density in balance and in good shape. So that's something that, maybe he wants to look more into his thyroid function, his parathyroid, his vitamin D levels to make sure this doesn't go on the red under value ranges. AST and ALT, liver functions that are not very precise when it comes to measuring liver toxicity, because muscle destruction and muscle hypertrophy that happens through working out hard tends to increase these two values. And a lot of doctors don't know that. And they tend to get very concerned. They think that there's some toxicity either because of the steroids or the testosterone or the supplements. In cases, this shows that this person is probably working out really, really intensely. And there is another way that we're going to find out whether his liver, we already saw that his bilirubin is nice, right? So we're going to see later another parameter, another variable that is actually more precise when it comes to liver function. So we can be for certain that obviously these two increases are not due to toxicities. Dihydrotestosterone, which is about 10% of total testosterone, is a metabolite of testosterone, has been linked with increased libido. Increased DHT has also been linked with hair loss or acne, and even with prostatic hyperplasia, which is inflammation of the prostate. But that, especially on the prostate side, that's still debatable. But you don't want to decrease DHT too much because that's the libido metabolite. And it is high. Why? Because his testosterone is high, and 10% of testosterone converts through the 5-alpha reductase enzyme to dihydrotestosterone. So he probably has a high libido. Not completely predictable, by the way. Doesn't always mean that high DHT is high, means high libido. Libido is a very complex variable that has psychological and environmental factors too. So now we're going to go through the CBC, which is a complete blood count panel. It's a very cheap panel that's usually under $20. And it tells you more or less how your immune system is doing in a very basic way, and how your red blood cells and hemoglobin are doing. Testosterone replacement, anabolic steroids, all of them, androgens in general, tend to increase the production of red blood cells. And that's good if you are anemic, but not very good if you overproduce them, because as more and more red blood cells are produced by the bone marrow due to the stimulating effects of androgens, you will start increasing your viscosity, your blood viscosity. And obviously we have a pump in our bodies called the heart. And the heart, you know, like any pump, can have issues with higher viscosity. Hemoglobin goes hand in hand. It's a substance inside the red blood cells that help capture oxygen from our lungs and take them to all the tissue. And both red blood cells and hemoglobin through erythrocytosis increase through testosterone use or anabolic steroid use. These numbers can also increase if you suffer from sleep apnea, because you're depriving your body of oxygen, and the body's trying to like produce more red blood cells so that the body can capture more oxygen through your sleep apnea, oxygen deprivation events at night. So it's very important to check yourself for sleep apnea, especially if you're tired in the day, because if you start testosterone or anabolics with sleep apnea, you're going to have more of this problem with increasing red blood cell count, hemoglobin, and hematocrit. Hematocrit is the proportion of red blood cells in the blood, in the serum. And as you can tell, and this is the #1 side effect of high doses of testosterone, even lower doses too, and anabolics, increase of hematocrit, and accordingly increase in viscosity of the blood. There's some studies, and you can read that in my books, either Testosterone, A Man's Guide or Beyond Testosterone, that have linked higher hematocrit with higher blood pressure and more myocardial infarction, more heart attacks. So that's something that is controlled by donating blood and or decreasing your testosterone dose. So it's very important. That's probably the #1 side effect. And some very few guys have a stabilization of hematocrit after a few weeks, but most men deal with this and they have to donate, but be careful donating blood, because if you donate too frequently, more frequently than every 2.5 months, you can lose a lot of iron and ferritin and become even more fatigued than when you started. And you can find all this information on ExcelMale.com or thescannerlabs.com. MCV is the mean corpuscular volume, the volume of the red blood cells, the mean volume. And in his case, he doesn't have enlarged red blood cells, or the volume of them is actually within the normal range. Some men, especially if you have B12 deficiencies, anemic, even sleep apnea, you can have really large MCVs, red blood cells. MCH is the mean corpuscular hemoglobin inside the cell, inside the red cells, the red blood cells. It's also within range. So he doesn't have either anemia, B12 deficiency, probably doesn't have sleep apnea either, and or probably he's been using higher doses not for too long. Long-term users tend to start having more issues with increase in the volume of red blood cells and the amount of hemoglobin. And this is basically red blood cells with also within normal. It shouldn't be unexpected. Platelet counts. Platelets help coagulate blood when you have a cut, bleeding of any kind, and anabolics don't have an effect on platelet counts, although I've seen some data that shows that long-term uses of oxandrolone, nandrolone may decrease platelet count, but I really haven't seen data to be too concerned. This is mean platelet volume, also really normal, that's fine. His immune system seems to be good. Neutrophils are white cells that fight disease, and absolute lymphocytes are good. Monocytes are another type of white cells that fight invaders. The same with EOS. They usually fight parasitic infections or bacteria. very good. Basal cells the same, another type of white cell, also fighters. So there are different types of tribes within the immune system, and each one is specialized in killing a certain invader. The percent of neutrophils, lymphocytes, all good. So his immune system is very good, and there's no reason to suspect, because anabolics and testosterone really don't change immune profile. Now, something else, a variable that most men obsess about, and I have videos on estradiol, so I'm not going to go into the details because it will take forever. But his estradiol is obviously high at 65 picograms per milliliter. It's a different unit, by the way, than nanograms per deciliter for testosterone. Around 0.4% of total testosterone gets aromatized in the liver, fat cells, etc., by aromatase, an enzyme. And every man needs estrogen. Estradiol is the main estrogen in men. It is responsible for increases or maintaining good bone health, bone density. Sex drives is linked. Several late studies. I actually going to be producing a video soon on the latest study on connecting higher estradiol to higher libido in men, and cognitive function too. So, but many men and doctors are obsessed with high estradiol. They want to block it. They want to bring it down. And the issue here, and I'm not going to go beyond the minutes that I don't want to bore you guys, but the fact is, you will have high estradiol if you have high testosterone, 0.4%. Multiply that by the total testosterone. That's what you get. That's what the body wants to produce to balance the testosterone. Testosterone without estradiol can have detrimental effects on cholesterol, on HDL, especially, and LDL. So estradiol also protects the heart, protects the cardiovascular system. It enhances the effects of testosterone. Blocking it is counterproductive, unless some men are really concerned about gynecomastia, which is increase in breast tissue under the nipple in men, which has been associated mostly with low testosterone, or men that are on steroid cycles that get off the steroid cycle and remain hypogonadal with low testosterone for a while their estradiol is high. But in general, men on testosterone, either replacement dosages or higher doses, do not need estradiol. Another bad assumption that men have and doctors have is that water retention has everything to do with estradiol, when in fact is edema, water retention in androgen use, it's related to androgens themselves and how androgens affect the accumulation of sodium in the blood. And as the body gets used to higher sodium levels, it then starts holding on to water to dissolve that. So it's a sodium balance. But anyways, I probably have 5 videos on the role of estradiol in men. So I'm going to move on. IGF-1 is a metabolite from growth hormone. This person has good levels, 246 within normal. Some bodybuilders have much higher levels, especially if you're using growth hormone. And you're always going to see a C-score when you see IGF-1, also done, by the way, by liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry, the most accurate for all hormone testing. So you see a 1.2, meaning that he's 20% over what an average is for his age, gender, etc. So that's not unreasonable. He's a bodybuilder, so he's producing probably more growth hormone. So now this is the most important variable that very few doctors check in bodybuilders is Cystatin C, which really measures how good your kidneys are functioning. As you saw before, he has higher AST and ALT liver enzymes, which I said is probably because he's working out hard. And now Cystatin C proves that his kidneys are fine. It's actually on the lower side of the green range here. So all good. His eGFR, his filtration rate, calculated using Cystatin C is humongous high, 123. So his kidneys are filtrating perfectly well everything that comes through them. GGT is like a lot like Cystatin C, is the liver enzyme that really determines of whether or not there's something going on with the liver. And as I said before, and I think I mentioned AST and ALT for kidney. I apologize for that. I meant high creatine. In some cases, doctors freak out. They think that the testosterone is affecting the kidneys. But once you run Cystatin C, you can see, hey, it's all good. And eGFR, obviously. For GGT, as I said before, high AST and ALT liver enzymes were probably associated with with working out, with a heavy resistance exercise. In his case, low GGT, his liver is fine. So that's also these two variables, Cystatin C and GGT, are usually not run by most doctors because they just don't. And instead they freak out when they see the kidney and liver functions in bodybuilders. When in fact is you can run a second test like this to verify. Something that we're learning slowly but surely is that many bodybuilders or long-term testosterone users start having lower ferritin levels, and in this case, it's actually within normal range. But I've seen a lot of cases where they're in the red, because the body is really trying, and ferritin is really the protein that serves as a storage of iron. And while we're going through testosterone replacement and or androgen or anabolic use, we tend to disrupt iron metabolism. Our bodies start using a lot of iron to produce more red blood cells. Because red blood cells need iron. Hemoglobin is really an iron-based protein. So we're using up more and more iron from the body. So you deplete the ferritin, which is really like the storage of iron in the body. And whether or not that has implications, we don't know. Whether or not long-term testosterone users or anabolic users tend to get fatigued or tired because of their lower ferritin levels. We're still debating that whole topic, especially if you're donating blood or going through therapeutic phlebotomy because your doctor tells you their hematocrit red blood cells volume is high. You may be losing more and more ferritin. So something else that most bodybuilders are not looking at is iron and ferritin, but in this case, he's still within normal, although it's on the lower side. Prolactin, a lot of bodybuilders worry about prolactin. High prolactin can cause erectile dysfunction. In the worst cases, due to pituitary adenomas or tumors in the pituitary gland, you can produce so much that your nipples start actually lactating, which is rare, but I've seen that happen in one of the guys I used to know. So but it rarely you see high prolactin, and although most bodybuilding forums will tell you that nandrolone, which is like a durabilin, may increase prolactin, etc. So that's why we included it in the bodybuilding, the bodybuilder blood work, comprehensive blood work panel. But in most cases, it's within normal. Okay, so that's basically one case. I'm going to go through real quickly on another person that is using a little lower dose, much lower doses. We're going to start basically with CBC, which is a blood count. His blood count is all good, except obviously when we go for hemoglobin and hematocrit, which are high because of this testosterone use, even though it's a lower dose, and that's not abnormal. MCVs, I'm gonna skip through that since it's all good and we didn't expect any, and his immune function is good. And then his testosterone is a little lower, 1200 instead of 2800. 2% of this, it came out to be closer to the upper side of the green range, which is the expected range. T3 is reverse T3 is a thyroid hormone that basically serves as the hormone that traps thyroid, the active thyroid hormone. Sometimes that could be very high, leaving your thyroid not as efficient in producing T4. Hemoglobin A1C, which measures blood, how your body is metabolizing glucose as an average, is all good anyways. Didn't expect anything different. Thyroid TSH to measure thyroid function is 286. Some doctors may look deeper if it's over 1.5. I think in this case, it's 286 within normal. Free T4 and free T3 within range. So his thyroid is not too bad. Iron and total iron capacity within, on the lower side, but within normal. So he hasn't really lost iron or donated too much blood. Ferritin, once again, even in this guy, on the lower side, because as I said, the body readjusts and starts consuming a lot more iron to produce red blood cells. And the DHEA, he's not taking a supplement, it's within normal range. Insulin, fasting insulin right early in the morning, it looks good, looks within optimal range. So he's not producing way too much insulin, which shows insulin resistance and issues with fat gain and even pre-diabetes or diabetes is good. And cortisol early in the morning also seems to be in a good range, which means his adrenals are working at least in the morning. Obviously, adrenal function is more complex than that. It needs to be checked either through blood work or saliva. So that's about it. I wanted to spend a little more time than I thought, but hopefully this can serve as a guide for those of you that are concerned about testosterone replacement on or bodybuilding doses of androgens. Thanks a lot. Please visit my site, discountedlabs.com, to buy blood tests online. In most of the United States, we include the doctor's prescription in the price, the best prices in the country. And also my men's health forum, ExcelMale.com. Please register there. I send a newsletter twice a week. I appreciate you guys putting up with a long video, and be ready for a few others that I'm going to be producing. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon.